Hey guys, so for those who are going to Dallas Regionals on the 27th, I'll be posting some expanded deck profiles for decks that you should consider when going to the event. And we're going to start things off with a Seismitoad Zoroark list. Now, Seismitoad Zoroark recently have been seeing a lot of play, and it has won some League Cups here and there, so this is a deck that you should consider to expect when going to the event. So to start things off, we'll be playing 4 copies of Seismitoad EX. Now, if you guys haven't been playing expanded format at all or recently, then you may or may not know what Seismitoad does. He is absolutely phenomenal. For a double colorless energy, he does the attack Quaking Punch. For 30 damage, your opponent cannot play any item cards from his or her hand during his or her next turn. Now, this is absolutely nuts, because it means they can't play their Puzzle of Times, their Alterables, their VS Seekers, their own Hypnotoxic Laser, which we'll be going over later on, and it just slows down what they do. And this is what the deck does: it just slows down the entire gameplay to the point where you've taken control of what your opponent can or cannot do. And yeah, Seismitoad is just so good. So next we'll be playing 3 copies of Zoroark from Black and White base. Now, I'm playing this Zoroark over the Paralyzing Gaze one because it can deal 30 damage for a DCE, which can KO a Joltik, and at the end of the day you're taking prizes, which is pretty good. So next we'll be playing 3 copies of Zoroark GX. Now, if you've played this game at all within the past month or so, you'd know that this card is amazing, because it has the ability Trade. Once per turn, before you attack, you may discard a card from your hand. If you do, draw 2 cards. Now, this is amazing, because it allows you to dig through your deck for absolutely anything you need. You need a Hypnotoxic Laser, trade, and just dig for it. You need a Alterable, dig, trade for it. Like, it is just so good. And it can also attack with Righteous Beating, which is for a double colorless. You do 20 damage times the amount of Pokemon in play. So this can cap out at 120 or 150 with a choice band. And with that, you can 2-shot anything in the game, including Wailors, which is pretty damn good. So next we play 1 copy of Zoroark from Breakthrough. Now, we play this Zoroark along with the GX because of the ability Stand-In. Once during your turn before you attack, if this Pokemon is on your bench, you may switch this Pokemon with your active Pokemon. And this with a Floatstone is the exact same as the Keldeo Floatstone combo, where you would use the ability to jump into the active and then free retreat into whatever you want. And this helps us get around the retreat cost of Seismitoad being a retreat cost of 3. And we're only playing double colorless energies in this deck, so this is going to be our main way to be constantly switching back and forth between different attackers. And it also has the attack Mind Jack. For a double colorless energy, it does 10 damage plus 30 more damage for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Now, this, with your opponent having a full bench, is 160 damage. With a choice band, it's 190 damage, which is big enough to KO a Buzzwole GX, which is a big counter for this deck. Yeah, so that's the reason why we play Zoroark in this deck. Next we play 1 copy of Execute from Plasma Freeze. Now, we play this Execute in our deck because of the ability Propagation. Once during your turn before you attack, if this Pokemon is in your discard pile, you may put this Pokemon into your hand. Now, this is weird because it's got the clause of once during your turn, but it's not actually once per turn, because when it goes back into your hand, it's considered to be private knowledge. So what that means is your opponent shouldn't know what's in your hand at all, unless they've looked at it. But even then, if you then hide it again, it's then considered private. So your opponent won't know if that's the same Execute that you've discarded or not. So what you can do is kind of abuse this and constantly discard it for Zoroark GX to then just discard the egg, draw 2, and then get the egg back. This is our way of constantly drawing without having to discard all of our resources that we need. Next, we play one copy of Shaman EX. Now, if you haven't been playing since Roaring Skies came out, then you wouldn't know that this card used to be really dumb. Like, this used to be the same value as a Tapu Lele GX back in the day, because of its ability setup. When you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench, you may draw cards until you have 6 cards in your hand. So you'd play this when your hand size is pretty low, and then you just draw back up, and then just keep doing whatever you were doing. And this has really good synergy with Alterable, since you minus 3 cards from Alterable, being having to play the Alterable and then discard 2 cards. You then get a Shaman EX going back up to a -2, and you then play Shaman to draw those 2. And that is just really good because it will help you dig for all of your combo pieces that you need. So if you're needing of a DCE, you can Alterable for a Shaman to try and draw it. If you need a Seismitoad, again, just try and draw it. Like, this card is just so good, and it is needed in this deck. And finally, for our Pokemon lineup, we're playing one copy of Tapu Lele GX. Again, if you've been playing this game very recently, you will know how good Tapu Lele GX is. For its ability One Tag. When you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench during your turn, you may search your deck for a supporter card, reveal it and put it into your hand, then shuffle your deck. So this is in the deck for if you ever need a supporter for basically anything. Your turn 1 play is normally Alterable for a Tapu Lele to then search a Ghetsis, to then play that Ghetsis, and hopefully make your opponent shuffle back their item cards, and then you draw a load. But this can be used later on in the game if you've ever needed to Acerola it, so then you can search for that Team Flare Grunt or that Shadow Triad to get back the Hypnotoxic Lasers. Like, this card is so versatile in this deck that it's a must of at least one. So starting up our item lineup, we play one copy of Computer Search. Computer Search is an A-spec which you can only play one of in any given deck, and for good reason. You discard 2 cards from your hand and search your deck for a card. This basically searches anything you need at that given moment, and it is absolutely amazing. Next we play 3 copies of Crushing Hammer. Now, Crushing Hammer says flip a coin, if heads, discard an energy from one of your opponent's Pokemon. Now, this is a really important card in this deck because we don't want our opponent to be setting up Pokemon on their bench whilst their active is poisoned and asleep. So you can get these with your Computer Search, you can get them back with Puzzle of Time. Like, if you ever need other hammer, 9 times out of 10 you'll most likely see it. So next we play 2 copies of Enhance Hammer. So Enhance Hammer says discard a special energy from one of your opponent's Pokemon. So with all the Zoroarks running around comes the double colourless energies that they need to attack. So playing this allows you to not allow them to put pressure on us as we're trying to stall them out with Quaking Punch and trying to poison them to death. So next we play 4 copies of Hypnotoxic Laser. And what this says is your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned. Flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active Pokemon is also asleep. So this is our way of dealing extra damage on top of the Quaking Punch's 30. So we play this along with Burbank City Gym, so all poison damage is tripled. So this laser will deal an extra 30 damage in between turns, and if you're lucky enough to get the sleep and they don't wake up, that's an extra turn that you can Quaking Punch, and it is absolutely amazing. So next we play 4 copies of Puzzle of Time. Now what Puzzle of Time says is you may play 2 Puzzle of Time cards at once. If you play 1, you rearrange top 3. That's terrible, we don't play it for that. We play it because if you play 2, you can get 2 cards from your discard pile and put it into your hand. So this allows you to reuse all your resources that you've used previously in the game, and because of that, it allows us to be able to play the long game against some other decks. So next we play 4 copies of Alterable, and what Alterable does is you discard 2 cards from your hand and search your deck for a Pokemon. So this allows us to keep searching for all of our Pokemon throughout the game. So if we have a Zorua on the bench, which is close to being KO'd, you can Ultra Ball for a Zoroark and evolve it into a Zoroark to save it from dying. We can search Seismitoad EXs to then keep on looping the Quaking Punches. Like, this is a main staple in like every single deck in both Standard and Expanded for a very good reason. So lastly, for our items, we play 4 copies of VS Seeker. And what VS Seeker says is put a supporter card from your discard pile into your hand. So this allows us to reuse supporters over and over and over again. So we can constantly reuse a Team Flare Grunt to keep energies off our opponents active if they're trying to retreat after awaking from a sleep, or if they're trying to build up a powerful attack that requires a few energies. We can slow them down quite a bit with it. So for our stadium of choice, we are playing 3 copies of Burbank City Gym, and what this does is put 2 more damage counters on poison Pokemon, both yours and opponents, between turns. So this with Hypnotoxic Laser allows us to triple all poison damage, which increases the attack of Seismitoad's Quaking Punch, which means we can put out more pressure on the board. So starting off our supporters, we play 2 copies of Acerola. And what Acerola does is allows us to pick up one of our Pokemon that has been damaged and everything attached to it. So if a Seismitoad is about to get KO'd, you just pick it straight back up and put up a new one attaching that same DC that you picked up, and it allows us to constantly do Quaking Punches over and over and over again. So next we play 1 copy of Getsis, and Getsis says your opponent reveals his or her hand and shuffles all item cards found there into his or her deck. Then draw a number of cards equal to the number of item cards your opponent shuffled into his or her deck. So this is the supporter we'd want to open with by going Ultra Ball Lele, because it allows them to be at a disadvantage when playing the game from the very get-go, with not having able to play items, which then sets us up for our turn 2 play of going DCE on a Seismitoad and do Quaking Punch. So then every single item they draw from then on out is just unusable unless they get around it with a Pokemon Ranger. But not many decks nowadays are playing Ranger, but with the hype of this deck, I reckon they will start to tech in Ranger. But then Ranger only helps for that turn, and then they've got to try and find a way to get it back with their items on that same turn. But this card is just absolutely nuts. Like, I've lost so many games because my opponent went turn 1 gets this. So next we play 1 copy of Guzma, and Guzma says switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon with their active Pokemon. If you do, switch your active Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon. So this allows us to do 2 separate things. The first thing being that we can grab weak Pokemon on our opponent's bench, because our damage output is not the highest in the world, being capping out at 90 with Seismitoad. And the second reason we play this is because it can help us get our damage stuff out of the active, so then later on in the following turns we can pick it up with an Acerola. Next we play 1 copy of Karen, and Karen says each player shuffles all Pokemon in his or her discard pile into his or her deck. So this is predominantly played for the Night March matchup, because a nice little combo that we can do is play Karen after they spend a turn or 2 dumping Pokemon in a discard pile, and then drop a Karen and then Quaking Punch. So we've just resetted their entire Night March count, plus the following turn they can't play items. So this is normally played like mid to late game after they've managed to discard a few with their Sycamores. And again, this just like really cripples the Night March player, which will definitely swing in our favour. So next we play one copy of Lysander, and what Lysander says is switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon with his or her active Pokemon. So this is played in a similar role to Guzma, in that we can pick off weaker Pokemon on their bench, and this doesn't have the clause where you have to switch. So if you have a Seismitoad in the active with nothing set it up on your bench, you can still play this and still bring up Pokemon. And there are going to be times where you don't want to switch because you don't have that DCE to retreat. So this is really good in that regard. So next we play 3 copies of N, and what N says is each player shuffles his or her hand into his or her deck, then each player draws a card for each of his or her remaining prize cards. So this is going to be our main way of drawing cards, because we're slowing the game down for both players. So we're always going to get a plus off this more times than not, and then even in the late game it'll stop us from decking out after we've traded quite a few times to dig for all the resources that we've needed throughout the game. Next we play 2 copies of Professor Sycamore, and what Professor Sycamore says is discard your hand and draw 7 cards. This is going to be our other draw support other than N, but we're playing more N than Sycamores because we'd rather not discard our cards through trade, but there are going to be times where you do want to discard your hand to be like towards the start of the game where you need that quick setup, and we can always get our resources back with the Puzzle of Times and VS Seekers anyway, so this is generally used towards the start of the game to get our quick setup. So next we play 1 copy of Shadow Triad, and what Shadow Triad says is put a Team Plasma card from your discard pile into your hand. So this is played so we can get more copies of Hypnotoxic Lasers after we've discarded them through trade, or we've used them to poisonously sleep the active. We can also get them back with Puzzle of Times, but this gives us a way with VS Seekers to then get our lasers back, which is really good, because now we have so many ways to get into our lasers that it shouldn't be too difficult to find one after we've drawn them. And our last supporter is 1 copy of Team Flagrant, and what Team Flagrant says is discard an energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. So if they're trying to build up energies on their active to try and retreat or attack, we can use this to slow them down and then follow it up with a Quaking Punch, so then they can't play items the following turn, and that in of itself is really strong. And to start off our tools, we play 2 copies of Choice Band. And Choice Band says the attacks of the Pokemon this card is attached to does 30 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon GX or active EX before applying weakness and resistance. So you would attach these to your Seismitoads, so then if they're hitting the EX or a GX, they do 30 more damage. So 60 damage plus Nice and Lock is really good, and then that on top of a laser with a Verbank out, that's 90 per turn. Plus they'll take 30 in between turns, so this can really stack up really quickly. And lastly for tools, we have 2 copies of Floatstone, and Floatstone says the Pokemon this card is attached to has no retreat. So you would mainly attach these to the Zoroark from Breakthrough, so then it can stand in and free retreat into whatever you like. This does get around status conditions just like the Keldeo, so if your active is asleep or paralysed, this will get through it. And finally for our energy count, we play 4 copies of double colourless energies, because that's what you need for Quaking Punch, for Mind Jack, for Righteous Beating, and even for Lunge. You can do it to Shaman, so it'll deal 30 damage, bounce back to hand, back in KO with Joltik. You can put a DC to a Lele to then do 20 times the amount of energy on both actives. Like, this is the energy for this deck. So that will conclude this deck profile of Seismitoad Zoroark. Now keep in mind, this is only my interpretation of the deck, so feel free to change bits and bobs to whatever you see fit, and do expect this to be running around at Dallas, because it is such a good deck. And yeah, so thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you all in my next video.